Hey everyone, welcome to another week of Political Capital here from the Check News Studios in Victoria. I'm your host, Rob Shaw. Thank you for joining us each and every week when we break down the latest in BC politics directly into your ear holes through all the audio podcast formats, Apple, Google, Stitcher, Podface, Podhumper Jr. Now that Maclean is back, Pod Patrol. We are everywhere that you need to be, plus on YouTube, plus on Check News on Sundays. Thank you for being here. Slightly different panel format this week. Katie is away, so I want to introduce a panelist who's new to the program, Marie Della Mattia, who has worked on numerous NDP campaigns, including the last two BC NDP campaigns with Premier John Horgan, helping him transform into that Premier dad that we know and everyone seems to love these days. Thank you for being here, Marie.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
And also, Marie meets the other requirement to be on the show, which is you have to be a good person. There's no bad people on this show. So that's good. Except for Maclean. He's the asterisk here. Maclean, welcome back. We can't speak about your absence due to the publication ban, but thank you for returning to the show.
Well, the special prosecutor's given me the morning off, and I want to thank you also for plugging Pod Patrol whenever you're in trouble.
That's right. They're at the rescue. Jillian Oliver, Green Strategist. Hello, Jillian. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So, another week, another kind of COVID umbrella over everything. This week, obviously, was the BC Restart Plan 2.0. All that anyone is talking about, trying to get back to some level of normal. The plan lays out 4 phases. We're kind of in one. We're heading to another one in mid-June. July is the beginning of a normal where things open up and restrictions kind of ease. And then September is almost back to business pre-COVID. Let's go around the table and just talk about what we think of that plan. It seemed to go over quite well, how it was received, that type of thing. We'll start with you, Marie.
I think people are excited about the prospect of a vaccinated COVID levels going down, getting back to normal, summer and into fall. That's really where everyone wants to be. The more people are picking up the vaccinations, we saw those numbers going down, and that's a trend that's going to, I think, pick up speed as we go forward. We're going to see that happening more and more. So getting people comfortable with some of the changes that are going to happen, I think, is part of the challenge. But also making sure that people are getting vaccinated and getting those shots in arms and making sure that we can get back to that semblance of normal where we can go be with friends, see our families, get out into maybe some more exciting events that maybe we've been missing for the last year and a bit. So I'm looking forward to it. I think that optimism is in a lot of people's minds now.
Yeah, that incentive to move on if we can reach a certain threshold. That was always kind of one of the questions and criticisms that's been out there is, can we motivate people more by giving them a plan to show them how good things could be? So it's possible, I guess, that this is the plan. Maclean, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, Marie touched on the big picture aspect and it very well. And it's such a big picture. It's been fascinating to watch people sort of identify and glom onto, minutia of the plan. I mean, I've heard discussion, people excited at the grocery store when I was shopping the other night about, well, on this date, hopefully, we'll get rid of the one-way arrows that everyone hates.
I like the one-way arrows. Is there something wrong with me? Something wrong with me, I think.
But you're one of the few, like myself, who actually pays attention to them.
Right.
But others are excited about a return to in-person religious services. I saw one article talking about, which games people will and will not be allowed to play at the casino when they reopen. For me, it was, I might get to go see a football game this year. And see my family and all that stuff too, yes.
Yeah.
But it's been fascinating watching people identify and talk about the parts that are the aspects of the plan that either directly affect their jobs or just things they're looking forward to.
Jillian, did you, as we were talking about it and everyone was getting all optimistic, we saw some other provinces talking about their plans and, we end up comparing ourselves to what everyone else is doing. But how did you feel that it went? It was an early week announcement, and then the rest of the week we kind of had other people chiming in and showing us their versions of reopening. But what did you make of that?
Yeah, well, I think the most notable one is Alberta, which came out like a day or two after ours, was it before? I forget. Anyway,
it
came
was
out
after.
recently.
Yep.
After, okay. And it's a lot more going a lot faster. They want to be like fully open by Canada Day, I think. And that's scary because their case counts are really high and they're our neighbors. I live in a region where we get a lot of tourists from Alberta, and it's really concerning. So I think that that's a good reminder that this isn't set in stone. And I think that I think that the BC's plan is excellent. It was really great to see that they laid out clear kind of milestones that we need to hit in terms of vaccinations and in terms of hospitalizations and case counts to actually move into the next phases. But I think that it was problematic that they also emphasized dates so much, because when you hear people talk about it that maybe didn't watch the briefing in detail, they think that these dates are set in stone. So I am a little bit concerned about expectations if we don't actually meet those milestones. Hopefully we do. I really am excited for each one to come as fast as it can, but I'm a little bit worried about that as well.
More episodes of Political Capital are available at checknews.ca/podcasts or search Political Capital wherever you listen to podcasts.
The pitfalls and the politics of this, both that the plan requires us to reach a 70% vaccination first dose rate, and a lot of people are talking about how hard it is to get the kind of the remaining vaccination rates in other countries, reaching those people who don't want to be vaccinated for whatever reason or aren't communicating with government. But also kind of the politics of this. We know that the Premier was getting a lot of pressure in the House to come up with a plan. That was the opposition line. We know Dr. Henry was getting a lot of armchair epidemiologists coming at her. Does this plan give them any breathing room? I kind of feel like maybe it gives them a month to get us to Canada Day to see how it goes. But how does it change the sort of criticism and dynamic and pressure on government? Let's go around again, Maclean.
It's tough. I mean, I agree with you in that the government has given itself some breathing room, and the danger, most of the pitfalls that are ahead are kind of out of the government's control. To Jillian's point, I think the biggest one is going to be if something happens, say vaccination supply, there's some problem in the chain, which again is dependent on the federal government, or if one of the variants spreads faster and gets out of control, people have, put June 15th on their calendars, quite literally, and all the other dates. And it's going to be tough to tell people on coming June 15th, should things go wrong, that actually, no, we're not moving forward with the next stage. Because it's not just a question of, having the rug yanked from underneath you. It's people are making plans. People are booking ferries. People are looking at flights and campsites, and they're really identifying these dates as when their lives can start again. And so, should something go wrong, whether it's the fault of the provincial government or just bad luck, there will be some bruised feelings and some frustration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a little bit of political risk, I guess. Maybe the idea that if we don't reach the rates, someone will look at the province and say, well, did we have the right clinics? Did we have the right resources? Were we reaching out to people in the right way? We know the Surrey pop-up clinic fiasco that happened, and then the kind of having to learn from that. But Marie, does this change in your mind the political dynamic or the criticism that the government or Dr. Henry's been facing now that the plan is on the table?
I think a lot of what Dr. Henry is doing is focusing on what people need, right? So they need some assurance that they can make some plans, but we also need to be looking at it from the point of view of we don't want to necessarily abruptly have to change and go back. And that's what I worry would happen with Alberta, that they maybe start on the path to reopening and then they have to go backwards again like they did before. So if we're looking forward, if we're reassuring people, if we're getting people on board with vaccinations, telling the stories about the things you can do once you're vaccinated, the things that are going to be better once you're vaccinated, I think that having that sense of, as Maclean said, being able to plan ahead, but also knowing that maybe it might actually come sooner if we all get on board and are doing those things faster. And I think Dr. Henry has been super cautious about those kinds of things. She's not the kind of person who sort of charges ahead and says, it's all going to be sunshine and roses tomorrow. She wants to be cautious about the steps as we go forward, so that maybe, if we achieve those goals sooner, we may be actually opening up sooner, and that's something people can get excited and happy about, rather than being told, oh, you have to cancel your plans. Mm-hmm. That would, I think, be a much worse situation, both for individual British Columbians, but also for the government and the public health officer.
Yeah. I mean, Dr. Henry, there's no matter what she does, she gets criticized for it, and that seems to. It seems to. I think it's been a lot. It's been a higher level of criticism, more criticism in the last month over the release of public data and various other things. She's been sparring a little bit every now and again. It felt like when we reached that point where we put the travel restrictions in, there was almost kind of this public sentiment of like, oh my God, I can't take any more of this. And maybe the plan lifts a little bit of that and lightens some of the criticism that she's facing. I don't know. Jillian, how do you put all of that in perspective?
Yeah, I think you're right. And like, I think to kind of go back to my first point, I think clearly laying out the thresholds that we need to reach in order to achieve these different phases of reopening is critical to that. And it's funny to think, I mean, I wish that we had that all along, because I think that would have actually stymied a lot of the criticism if people had sort of been able to have more transparency around what's driving these decisions. I think probably the reason for that is because now that we're at the end and we're fully reopening, it's very serious. It's a big deal. It is totally driven by the data, but in the past, I think that it wasn't necessarily 100%. It was, mostly driven by the data, but also driven by some political calculus as well, which is why they were reluctant to release full transparency. But I think the flip side of that is that it would have stymied a lot of the criticism and uncertainty that people were experiencing, especially in these last couple months towards the end.
Yeah. Let's go around one more time on this, but just in a more political lens. Are we going to reach a politics as normal moment here in BC after September, when presumably we go back to normal, or maybe even before then, where we start talking about non-COVID related things in the legislature and having debates over government bills and looking for, I'm looking for the agenda to resume that the premier campaigned on in the election to materialize that was non-COVID related. Are we going to get there this year, do we think? Let's just quickly go around on that. What do you think, Marie?
I think we will get there. I think that we're coming closer to the point where the control over the virus is something we can manage. It'll become this kind of ongoing management thing as opposed to the only thing. And I think that once that happens, there'll be more attention to other topics. And I don't think the agenda that you're talking about isn't happening. I think it is being worked on. There are lots of things that different cabinet ministers and folks are working on every day that aren't COVID related. But you're right, it's this layer that is dominating, and everyone, like even this week, everyone was back to the what's Bonnie Henry saying and what's it going to mean to me, and how does this affect me, and what's happening with the vaccines, and all of those things just kind of reconsumed us all again this week in a big way. But I think we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and we'll be focusing on other things. I hope soon.
Jillian, do you think we're going to get there?
Yeah, I think so. Largely, I think people are ready to kind of turn their minds to other things. But I think that there will be some lingering aspects that will, because all of the recovery is going to be kind of framed in terms of COVID. And, things have been so disrupted that it's going to be impossible to divorce it. And then I think there's also going to be opposition parties that don't want to leave the handling of the pandemic in the past. There's some BC Liberal leadership candidates that are calling for public inquiries into the government's handling of it. And, I think that there's been so much that's happening, and a lot of people have tuned out, that once we do have time to reflect, there might be some things that the public really wants to kind of see teased out and sort of relitigated a little bit as well. But I think that it'll be a much smaller part of our political discourse.
More episodes of Political Capital are available at checknews.ca/podcasts, or search Political Capital wherever you listen to podcasts.
Let's move on to the next subject, and I'll come to you first, Maclean, on that one. But Fairy Creek. So we've talked about this in the past, but essentially, let's boil this down for people again. There's more than 130 protesters who've been arrested in the Premier's riding in the last week or so at Fairy Creek, who are protesting an old-growth logging forestry, an old-growth logging permission that Teal Jones has to log old-growth trees that they obtained a court injunction to actually do. That's the easiest way to explain it, I guess. It can be quite complicated, but anyways, it has turned into this kind of, I don't want to say war in the woods because that's overused, but it's certainly a simmering civil disobedience issue in the Premier's riding, and it's highlighted the old growth versus continued forestry issue that the government's facing. Let's go around and talk about that. Maclean, what do you make of this? And it's not really resonating in the legislature to the extent that I would think it might be, but it seems like an interesting issue.
I mean, I don't know that I would agree that it's not resonating in
Okay,
the
well, we'll
issue.
just cut your feed until you agree, but
We'll
otherwise,
fix that in post.
yeah, that's
But
right. Yeah.
I think the Greens have actually done a pretty admirable job in highlighting the issue and raising it and prosecuting it quite honestly. And the problem is it is a complex issue. It's not. I mean, it's a difficult issue to summarize in a sentence or a tweet. I mean, it's about old growth logging. It's about UNDRIP comes into it. It's the complex issues in the Pacheedaht First Nation, which seems divided on it. They're involved with the company and some of the benefits in the logging there. So it gets complicated, and also the report that was commissioned before the election and the government said they would act on, and it's apparently taking a while to put in place. But there's a lot of moving parts here, and yes, the temptation, if you want to call it that, to compare it to the war in the woods is there, and I mean there are real parallels, and I guess it could get there. But I think we're also forgetting just how huge the war in the woods was. I mean, that was legitimately an international issue that got made headlines around the world. We're not there yet. We could get there, but it's early days.
Marie, what do you make of all of this and kind of the debate that's happening here?
Yeah, I think Maclean hit on the key issue. It's hard, and it's hard in part because of respecting the rights of Indigenous people. That there are lots of things that we can be doing and that we have been doing to protect old growth in British Columbia. And in this case, the Pacheedaht are saying this is our decision, and we want to make it, and respecting that decision and not sort of unilaterally imposing something on them, I think is an important part of what the government's grappling with and considering. And in the places where, in respect to the report, in the places where there has been agreement that and there is a conversation happening with First Nations, there are hundreds of thousands of hectares of old growth that have been protected in places where there is that agreement. So it is a really difficult situation. I think everyone wants to see that old growth protected, and working together to make sure that it's done in a way that's respectful of the First Nations rights is really important.
Jillian, the Premier's talked about a new plan next month on old growth versus forestry. Do you think that will settle this issue, or what do you think that's going to look like?
I don't know what it's going to look like. I wish that I did, but I think that for sure you're never going to make everyone happy on this issue. Like, there are people calling for a full moratorium on old growth logging, but that's not what the report calls for. That's not what the Greens are calling for. It's not what the scientists are calling for. I think the question will be, does this actually meet the test that the government set for itself in committing to implement all of the recommendations of the report, which is a really high bar. Like, the report calls for an entire paradigm shift in the way that we manage our forests. So it's a big deal. So I don't know. I think we just kind of have to wait and see. I think that the fact that it's coming out soon shows that the NDP realizes that this is a really potent, important political issue for them. And I don't know. It's hard to guess where it's going to go.
Yeah, well, it's a file that the Premier personally is invested in, forestry. He likes to talk about it. He grew up working in mills. So his fingerprints are on this, and he's clearly aware of it. You don't hear much from him about what's happening in his riding, but he's seized of the issue. So we'll wait and see what that report looks like next week. Let's close off the show with a hot take here on back to COVID. I mean, as everything is back to COVID, but the reopening plan this week led to a lot of discussion about anxiety levels of people as we return to normal. Are you ready? Are you willing to, get rid of those one-way grocery store aisles, take your mask off maybe in July, optionally in certain places, be in a big crowd again? Does that raise your anxiety level? So let's go around and just say, are you anxious at all? I mean, everyone's excited, but are you anxious about this plan? Does it bring up any sort of anxiety in your mind? Marie?
I think does. I think it does for a lot of people. We've been wearing those masks for a long time. Them suddenly coming off, I think is going to be a big change. And I kind of wonder if it starts to become something a little bit more like, your sunglasses in certain situations, based on your comfort, based on how you feel. You're going to wear your mask, and then crowds and grocery stores maybe, but in other places you won't. You'll be fine without them. And maybe if it gets a little bit of a fashion statement and not the political football that it seems to be in some places, particularly the States, then hopefully it'll all come just to be a little bit more normal.
Yeah, Maclean, you got a great mask collection, including a Macho Man Randy Savage mask.
True.
You're not gonna want to stop wearing masks. This is your thing. You're just gonna be that guy who's wearing masks long after you have to wear masks.
You know what? Here's the thing. I am quite ready to burn most of my masks.
Okay.
Not the Macho Man mask. That is a work of art. I agree with Marie. There will be times in which I think it's prudent to wear a mask, especially if I'm not feeling well. That would be a time to continue wearing a mask. But all things being equal on a day-to-day basis, no, I'm not anxious, and I am very ready to go back to normal. I am, counting down the days and have actually great faith that when we do return to normal, it'll be safe to do so.
Yeah. Jillian, 20 seconds. What's your anxiety level?
The medium. Like a lot of people, I think like the pandemic has gone on for so long, our lives have changed a lot permanently during it. So we don't actually know how that's going to feel when we get out of it. So I'm definitely a little anxious about that.
Yeah, I think we'll be okay. My anxiety is going to ramp up when we reach flu season in the fall again, because then the germs are flying around and you're getting sick standing in the grocery store, but the summer will be great, I think. So thank you everyone for being on the show this week. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week with all the latest on BC politics here on Political Capital.
More episodes of Political Capital are available at checknews.ca/podcasts or search Political Capital wherever you listen to podcasts.